It is 1:35, and so I think I'm going to get us started so that we stick within the time frame we told our presenters we would be. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Hudson, and I work for the City of Ashland, Wisconsin as the Park and Rec Director. And I am also the co-chair of the Wisconsin Coastal Beaches Workgroup, which you're going to be hearing a little bit about in just a moment. Today's webinar is Connections Between Wetlands and Beach Water Quality. During this webinar, you will discuss the role, or we will discuss the role of wetland and water quality and how restoration work can improve the function of beaches as multi-user spaces. We have two wonderful presenters with us today. Kyle Magyera, he is the local government outreach specialist with the Wisconsin Wetlands Association, and Dr. Joanna Grand from the senior spatial ecologist from the National Audubon Society. There we go. So just some basic go-to meeting housekeeping agendas is that please remember to mute your microphone so we don't get any feedback. And then to save on bandwidth, please keep your cameras off until it is question and answer time and you want to answer a question or you're presenting. And then questions can be submitted into the chat box. So if you look in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, it's kind of a little word bubble up there. Also, there is an icebreaker question that's happening right now that you can input stuff to, is that if you could be any aquatic animal, what would you be? So feel free, and you can copy each other too. Next is a little quickly about the Wisconsin Coastal Beaches Workgroup. I realized this has a lot of information on it when I was looking over my slide, and I got to change it up the next time I do this. So the Wisconsin Coastal Beaches Workgroup is a group of professionals and funders involved in managing and improving Wisconsin's 200+ Great Lakes beaches. It was established in 2015 to facilitate information sharing, coordination, leveraging stakeholder input, research guidance, and funding connections. The steering committee is comprised of 10 to 12 beach-related professionals associated with reaching a tangible high-priority objectives as identified by its members and its staff. You can contact the committee co-chairs, myself and Natalie McGee, who is also on this call, along with the organizers, Todd Brybe from Wisconsin Coastal Management and Natalie Chin from Wisconsin Sea Grant, who is also part of this. And without further ado, I am going to pass this presentation on to Kyle, correct? And Kyle, I'm going to make you presenter. Hang on a second, I got to do all this. Stop screen sharing, and I got to find you to make you a presenter. And Kyle, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
All right, thanks, Sarah. I appreciate the invite to speak today. I'm just working through, it's asking me for some privacy issues about sharing my screen. Yeah, I'm having some issues there of sharing my screen. It's privacy settings, apparently.
Okay, let me see what I can do real quick. Natalie, do you want to talk about what you just posted in the chat?
Sure, I just posted a link to our group's webpage, and then also if you'd like to subscribe to the Wisconsin Coastal Beaches Workgroup listserv, you can send an email to that email address that I put in the chat.
You know, Kyle, I have no idea.
Do you want to pull up that presentation that I shared with you, and I can just roll with it that way?
You bet.
All right. Well, while that's getting pulled up, sorry for the tech issues. I'm sure we're all dealing with that now. It's pretty common. But apologies that that wasn't sorted out. I'm Kyle Magyera. I'm a local government outreach specialist with the Wisconsin Wetlands Association. We're based in Madison, but do statewide work. A lot of my work is coordinating natural flood management initiatives up in the Lake Superior Basin. So I'm going to be talking about revitalizing stream wetland corridors as a way to improve beach health or water quality on the coast. So I guess we'll just have to roll with this and adapt. So let's go next slide. As I mentioned, I gave a little overview of the Wisconsin Wetlands Association, but if you're unfamiliar with our organization and our work, you can definitely take a peek online and learn about us. But in short, we're a nonprofit. We're actually one of the first statewide wetland groups ever to form in the United States. So we're unique in many respects, but there's many wetland groups that are starting to form utilizing our model. We strive to be science-based and nonpartisan, and we have membership from all over the country. But our strategic plan and theory of change is all about helping people and communities see wetlands as solutions. Next slide. Over the last couple of years, we've really shifted our thinking and where our niche is and where we can be most impactful with our programming. And that has resulted in a pretty heavy investment in promoting and advocating for greater investments in hydrologic assessment and restoration. And so what that means is working with interdisciplinary teams and thinking about the different portions of a watershed and really striving to go from a headwaters down to the bay or estuary or whatever the larger water resource is that you're seeking to protect. Most of the water is in the headwater portions of our tributaries, and as we think about the outsized influence of those tributaries feeding in to the Great Lakes, it's really important to think upstream and what the health or condition of those floodplains and wetlands are in those different parts of the watershed. So that means forming the proper partnerships, understanding what historically existed and whether there's how you can bring some semblance of those conditions back based on a modern context, assessing what those modern constraints are from infrastructure to land use and so on, evaluating different restoration scenarios and really looking at ways to reconnect streams, floodplains, and wetlands, and scheming, designing, and installing practices. And really where I think there needs to be more investment is making sure that we're evaluating and sharing our results. So putting more time into the monitoring, the modeling, to make sure we have good field verified data that can inform our decision making. Next slide. Here's just another schematic to give you a sense of the diversity of wetland types that it can exist in our watersheds and how they interact with different landforms. They can be very small, from springs and seeps to ephemeral ponds. You may have channeled stream wetland corridors where you have a single thread channel flowing through a sedge meadow or a hardwood swamp. And in many areas, naturally speaking, our stream channels were never single thread. In most cases, they were multi-channels that flowed across like a floodplain that consisted of a rich mosaic of different habitat types. So really protecting that corridor and allowing those different hydrologic features to form and thrive is really important as you think about a watershed context. And that all of course matters as you're working on the coast and how all that water, sediment, and debris impacts things downstream. Next slide. The most important thing to think about in terms of healthy watersheds or resilient watersheds is that our river systems are naturally meant to move. You can see from this a lot of the LiDAR imagery that's coming online recently. There's some very creative ways of depicting the lateral migration or really the influence our fluvial systems on the valley bottom. And so you can see just, these are larger systems, of course, but the same concept holds true even when you're talking about smaller headwater streams. The character, their appearance and behavior is going to be very different based on their valley setting, and again, how they're interacting with those landforms. But if we're striving to improve water quality, it's giving streams and rivers the ability to roam across the valley bottom is going to be very critical. Next slide. And again, emphasize, it all comes down to the headwaters. That's where most of the water, in some figures I've seen 60, 80%, even more, depending on which setting you're in. But most of our water is going to be maintained, stored, infiltrated in the headwaters. But these are also smaller wetland types. So as we've gone through deforestation, agricultural ditching, these are also smaller wetland types, and they've been more easily manipulated, and that water has all been displaced downstream. So you can see where you have a lot of that water, you get that real dense and almost that mutant sedge look that you see in that smaller left image. But those headwaters, if your water is displaced downstream, lower in the floodplains, or even down by the coast, that's all going to impact the flow and just the amount of sediment and erosion that's occurring in our watersheds, and therefore the nutrient loading that's also taking place. Next slide. Connected floodplains are the next one of the next pieces in the puzzle, and connected floodplains can, again, thinking back on that schematic I showed earlier, they can take on, they can look in many different ways. Sometimes they might be forested, they might have a nice, rich sedge meadow, but a healthy floodplain will have a combination of different depths and velocities of different channel types that exist across the floodplain. You can see that just by everyone sitting here in this floodplain wetland of a small headwater catchment of in the headwaters of the Bad River watershed. So there's a lot of complexity, that dense vegetation that's slowing water, and when a big rain event happens, that water is able to easily swell out of its banks and interact with these intact wetlands that form the system. Next slide. The valley bottoms are also an important thing or factor as we think about those different landforms, or just the overall resilience or health of the system. On the left, you can see a nice schematic where you have a high water table. There's lots of infiltration. You have those multiple channels flowing through that valley. And even though this is from a mountainous landscape, the Lake Superior watershed is definitely steep terrain and behaves in many ways just like a mountainous landscape. So that the valley, it's really critical to think about those valleys. But as we get more rain, or as we change the land use and accelerate the movement of water, those valleys become at risk, and they become channelized and start to unravel on a reach or a watershed scale. So that lowers the water table, that dries out wetlands, that disconnects floodplains, and causes sediment and those nutrients then to move downstream in almost a fire hose effect. Next slide. So one of the things that in taking this phenomenon, or this type of impact to an upper watershed setting, the same thing starts to happen as you get more erosion occurring, especially which is those erosional processes that are activated after big storms. Here's an example from Bayfield County, where you're seeing head cutting and gullies starting to work their way up into small ephemeral ponds, and it creating almost a large canyon that's, again, one that's contributing to the loss of wetland storage, and then disconnecting those floodplains and really causing our headwaters to be dysfunctional. So getting a better handle on where erosion-induced drainage is happening, and sometimes it can be on a very small scale. So sometimes our mapping technologies don't allow for a full assessment of this type of hydrologic impact. Next slide. That, of course, as we're displacing water and sediment, that can destabilize the bluff toe and contribute to the bluff erosion. But this is from Troutmere Creek in the Marengo River watershed, and this is, again, a small headwater channel. What you're seeing, very catastrophic bluff failures, where you see the groundwater sapping or seeps and the piping of water because of the agricultural activity within this catchment. So those seeps, or even small wetland pockets that are forming on some of these bluffs, that's all because of displaced water, and it's causing those bluffs to slump. And combined with that toe erosion, you're starting to see massive landslides that then go down and flood culverts and cause some of the catastrophic flood damages that we see in these big flood events. Next slide. Recently at a hydrologic restoration symposium that we held, we had Dorothy Merritz from Franklin and Marshall College speak about the legacy of sedimentation in a lot of our watersheds. And even though she was working in a different landscape, she referred to the occurrence of that accelerated sedimentation, or the overbank deposition that's causing a floodplain disconnection, as the Pompeii effect. So all that sediment is moving downstream and is causing that water to be channelized and energized as it moves downstream. And at the bottom of this image, you can actually see it's an old, I think, a horse ford crossing, where the logs in that lower right-hand corner are sticking out. That's probably right around the point where the natural or the historic floodplain used to exist. So you have a channel that's built up. It was at least as tall as me, about 6 foot tall. And so even in large storm events, that water is unable to spill out of its banks and interact with the floodplains. So we have natural infrastructure that's underperforming. Next slide. And as we think about our beaches and estuaries, this is just, some aerial imageries of the Fish Creek estuary, and I know there's a lot of research starting to go into HABs and looking at the sedimentation, but we definitely need to take a careful look at what's going on in the upper watershed and how it's fueling some of the sedimentation or these harmful algal bloom events that we're starting to see in Lake Superior. It also contributes, as we think about wild rice and other cultural resources. Wild renewment needs that smooth hydrograph. So if you have a lot of, and also a healthy balance of sediment. So if we don't strike the right balance, it's going to definitely create harmful impacts downstream on the coast. Next slide. There's a lot of research going into, especially in more of the agricultural regions, but I want to point you to one study where out of the St. Anthony Falls Laboratory out of the University of Minnesota, where they looked at multiple scenarios and actually concluded that wetland complexes in the right situations can be almost 5 times more effective than other nitrogen-based mitigation strategies, such as cover crops and a lot of those in-field practices. So definitely take a look at that paper. Next slide. Here's one schematic from that. There's a lot on the screen, and in the interest of time, I'll just point you to the basic conclusion. If you take a look at that paper, is that as you started to get wetlands disconnected because of ditching or just outright wetland loss, you saw higher concentrations of nitrates as compared to catchments that had more intact or connected wetlands. So there's research that does demonstrate the value of wetlands to nitrate reduction. Next slide. So I'm going to breeze through this, but to tie it back to some of my current work, we're really promoting the concept of natural flood management. In short, that is hydrologic restoration to build flood resiliency or reduce risks. So focusing on the ways to mitigate that erosive energy or to slow the flow, reconnecting those hydrologic systems, and really trying to employ process-based restoration to work with and mimic those natural processes. Next slide. I didn't really touch on the impact of the upper watershed hydrologic modification to infrastructure, but there's some exciting work going on in the Marengo watershed, where we're starting to look at calculating or inventorying repetitive loss locations, generating benefit cost data, and prioritizing areas that can be good natural flood management target areas. Next slide. To give you an example of what that's looking like, taking a catchment scale approach, so working at different places in the watershed, in different ravine settings to reduce sediment loads, reconnecting floodplains, and trying to help farmers who have been dealing with a lot of these washouts and are looking for creative solutions. Next slide. So it's in closing and thinking about how we think about the multi-uses or multi-objective projects. You know, this is Bay City Creek on the South Shore in the city of Ashland, cuts right through the heart of the city, through Northland College, a school district. But as you think upstream, further south of the city, I've walked these areas, and a lot of the degradations that I breezed through today all exist within this area. So whether you're in an urban or rural setting, and thinking about ways to maybe create an outdoor recreation corridor and building that flood resilience and reducing water quality, there's certainly opportunities no matter which scale or setting that you're working in. Next slide. And to close my talk for today, I wanted to highlight a quote that Katie Yacht had at the end of her talk in the Hydrologic Restoration Symposium. I'm not going to read that, but I think it was inspired by her interaction with local officials. She's working out of Colorado. They have some very interesting disaster recovery work, but through their process, they've been looking at ways to identify how do you implement flood mitigation projects and to really hit on those multiple uses. So in the boxes, they've created an assessment tool to look at strategies that are going to provide community value, that will provide flow and storage benefits, which will benefit the habitat or the ecosystem, and which are going to help address some of those geomorphic hazards. So you can definitely pull up presentations from the symposium on demand, but you know, there's definitely what we need to really rethink and strive for multi-objective projects that simultaneously build and help reduce the flood peaks, but also provide water quality benefits in those multi-use spaces along our coasts. So with that, I think I'm done. Thanks for the little trip up in the beginning there, but I'm available for questions, and I think we're holding those till the end. So thanks for the invite to speak.
Thank you very much, Kyle. And thanks for putting my pet project on there, the Bay City Creek. So for those of you that don't know, Ashland is by Bayfield, Wisconsin. That's how most people know where we are, but we're in the Chequamegon Bay, and Bay City Creek runs through the middle of town, and it's a heavily impacted kind of sub-watershed of the Fish Creek watershed. So it's pretty cool, and someday we're gonna make it better. It's my hope. Next we have on the docket is Dr. Joanna Grand, who I am really excited to be able to have her present to us. So I hope this works, Joanna. Here, I'm going to make you the presenter.
All right.
And I will let you introduce yourself and what you do also.
All right. Are you seeing the screen?
Yes, we are.
Wonderful. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Joanna Grand. I am a senior spatial ecologist at the National Audubon Society. Been there for about 5 years. And mostly I focus on conservation planning all across the country in all different types of landscapes, but mostly coastal landscapes. The Great Lakes is the only freshwater coastal landscape I work in. So it's an interesting change for me. And I just wanted to thank Sarah for inviting me to share this work with you today. At Audubon, we rely on marsh birds as indicators of ecosystem health, and we use them to guide our allocation of conservation resources in the region. So today I'll be sharing our approach to prioritizing the U.S. Great Lakes coastal wetlands for conservation using marsh birds. So we all know that the Great Lakes coastal wetlands provide critical resources for both birds and people. Unfortunately, more than half have been lost since the turn of the century, due mainly to conversion to other land uses. And the remaining wetlands face ongoing degradation and development, degradation from development, water level stabilization, sedimentation, nutrients, climate change, invasive species, and lots of other threats. Many marsh bird populations have really declined severely in recent decades. Some as much as 80% of their population has been lost. And coastal wetland loss has been and continues to be a major threat to marsh birds, but it's also a major threat to the coastal communities that rely on the ecosystem services wetlands provide. So we've heard a bit about some of these already. Everything on the list, on the left of the list is, these are services that are critical for adaptation to climate change, as the Great Lakes are predicted to experience abrupt swings between extreme high and low water levels in the future. The carbon storage and sequestration benefits are high, although in freshwater wetlands, we also have to deal with the issue of the emission of methane, so that needs to be accounted for when considering climate mitigation benefits. But I think the consensus at this point is that the carbon benefits outweigh the emissions. So that is still a good reason to conserve wetlands. In addition, freshwater wetlands located near where the surface water enters an aquifer help with groundwater recharge. And as everyone is well aware at this point, healthy wetlands act as filters by removing sediment, nutrients, and pollutants from water. Finally, they provide significant recreational benefits. And according to the EPA, the recreational benefits account for about $50 billion annually in economic activity in the region. So why do we use marsh birds? Basically, they are ideal indicators of ecosystem health because they're sensitive to pollution, invasive species, and flooding. So, so that's why we focus on the marsh birds for our work. And our main goals for this analysis were to maximize conservation dollars by identifying the most important coastal wetlands for marsh birds in the U.S. Great Lakes. And the protection and restoration of these areas could not only help mitigate marsh bird declines, but simultaneously increase the ability of coastal communities to adapt to impacts of climate change, among other things. So this is an overview of our 5-step analysis. First, we surveyed marsh birds at a sample of coastal wetlands. Then we corrected those survey counts for imperfect detection. I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. In step 3, we compiled remotely sensed environmental predictors. And in step 4, we predicted the distribution and abundance of marsh birds across all Great Lakes coastal wetlands. And then finally, we combined all those predictions to create a multi-species prioritization. So we wanted to apply our predictions to all of the remaining wetlands across the US. So we combined 3 different wetland data sets shown here to create a layer of maximum wetland extent. The first data set was the Coastal Wetland Monitoring Program surveyed wetlands, which are basically the large wetlands greater than 4 hectares in size and hydrologically connected to a Great Lake. Then we also used a data set from the EPA that's satellite-derived coastal wetlands, and the emergent wetland class from the National Wetland Inventory. So this created a real comprehensive wetland map for the analysis. So our marsh bird surveys were conducted as part of the Coastal Wetland Monitoring Program, and the program was initiated by the EPA to assess and monitor biotic conditions at remaining wetlands. We included over 1,100 surveys at 376 US wetlands in our analysis. And it's a standardized 15-minute point count and monitoring program. They collect an average of go to an average of 3 survey points a year, and each one is at least 250 meters apart. So the data set contains sufficient observations to build models for the 14 species shown here. And these species are all associated with a variety of different wetland characteristics, ranging from relatively undisturbed hemi-marsh to wetlands surrounded by agriculture. So just a bit about the detection correction. Since many marsh birds are notoriously elusive, and there's a lot of variation in the detection probability across species, regions, seasons, time of day, and weather. So due to the difficulties detecting the birds, we needed to correct for that in our estimates of abundance. And so the 2 components of detection are availability, which is the probability that a bird sings or calls if present, and perceptibility, which is the probability that a bird is detected if it's vocalizing. So we used some statistical techniques to create detection correction factors, and then we put those into our models to get more accurate abundance values. So we included 10 environmental predictors at a resolution of 100 meters. And that was the approximate maximum radius of detection for most bird observations. Each of the land cover predictors, like the proportion of open water, herbaceous wetland, etc., they were all measured at within a 400-meter buffer around each survey point. And we also included the average annual lake levels during the breeding season to account for the effects of hydrologic fluctuations. And we included latitude and longitude and year to account for any spatial or temporal variation that was unexplained by any of the other land cover predictors. So I'll just say a tiny bit about the statistical methods. We used a machine learning technique called boosted regression trees. And to address the large number of absences in the data set, which is a pretty common problem with marsh birds, we used a 2-step hurdle model approach, which just means that first we predicted occurrence, where the birds were likely to be, and then just in those areas where occurrence was predicted, we then predicted relative abundance. And so that kind of takes care of the many zeros in the data set. Next, we took all of those 14 species models and we put them together into a multi-species optimization. And that produced a ranking of every wetland cell based on the highest value for any species. And the algorithm we used is based on the concept of complementarity. So it means that the high-ranking sites complement each other in terms of species composition, so that the result is an efficient reserve network that represents every species in the minimum number of sites. So we also wanted to make sure that the at-risk species had higher representation in the prioritization. So to do that, we assigned weights to each species based on their vulnerability to climate change and also their state and range-wide conservation status. So here are the results of the prioritization. The yellow areas are high priority and the darker shades are low priority. The high priority wetlands represent wetlands that were predicted to be occupied by one or more of the species we considered, and thus warrant protections to ensure their persistence. So here I'm just showing the top 20% of those ranks. And you can see that that represents about 240,000 hectares of coastal wetlands, and less than half of those are currently protected to some degree. And that's a very conservative estimate, as you know, many of the protection categories are not necessarily focused on biodiversity conservation. You know, they might allow multiple uses and things like that. So protection is kind of a vague term here. So we can take a closer look at some of these high priority areas. This first one is the St. Louis River Estuary, Chequamegon Bay, Green Bay, Wisconsin. This was a little surprising given its the extent of development in the area. The Straits of Mackinac, and this is a huge area of high priority wetlands, most of which are undersurveyed or not surveyed at all due to accessibility issues. So that's a need right there for more monitoring. The Saginaw Bay is another one. Anchor Bay, Western Lake Erie, and Eastern Lake Ontario. These are just some of the highlights, really. So then for each lake, we calculated the proportion of wetlands in the top 20%. And so the donut plots here show those proportions in green. And we found the highest proportions were in Lake Ontario, and then Lake Erie and Huron, and then the lowest were in Lake Superior and Michigan. We also calculated the protected status of these high priority wetlands and found that most of the protected wetlands were in Lake Superior, which had the lowest proportion of high priority wetlands, and Lake Ontario's high priority wetlands were the least protected. So just in summary, we identified 240,000 hectares of high priority wetlands, most of which are unprotected. The Straits of Mackinac and the surrounding areas are critically important to marsh birds and do need further monitoring. And from our results, we really think there's ample opportunities to benefit both marsh birds and people by protection of these high priority coastal wetlands in the region. Just a little bit about applications of this work. So Audubon Great Lakes has been working for over a decade in the area to reverse marsh bird declines and build a healthy freshwater ecosystem. We positively impacted over 250,000 acres to date, and we are using these results to guide where we allocate our resources going forward. We also use the results to encourage the EPA to make marsh birds a priority in their recent restoration action plan. And finally, I just want to thank my collaborators and all the many institutions involved in the Coastal Wetland Monitoring Program. And I'll just mention that this work is published in Biological Conservation and can be accessed at the reference you see here. And that is all for me. So I think we probably may have time to take questions.
We do. If anyone has any questions that they would like to ask, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can go ahead and put your question in the chat box, which is this little bubble, the little word bubble at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Thank you, Joanna. This was really great. The high priority wetlands at the Straits of Mackinac are impressive that much area is there and that it's not protected. So. Any questions?
I'll start off with one, Sarah. So this is for maybe a little more for Kyle, but Joanna, feel free to chime in also. What recommendations do you have for folks who are trying to figure out which wetlands to prioritize, or for restoration, or just trying to, get started on restoration initiatives in their area?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a lot of what we're trying to figure out in the Marengo River watershed. That Joanna presented a great tool that can help, and some of that approach is being utilized in the upper parts of the watershed. So, for example, there's methods to do wetland functional assessments and trying to make those more integrated with some of the floodplain functional assessments that are out there. But the big thing, I think it's a combination of looking at the data, but really rooting your analysis and what's the problem that you're trying to address. In the Marengo, that's been infrastructure challenges, and I think that's probably true for a lot of Great Lakes communities. But understanding where those problems are, and then looking upstream or throughout the catchment area to identify where there's been disruptions to the hydrology. So there's data sets that you can compile and which can assist you in that kind of brief assessment. But I think it's the most important to really define your question and then anchor your spots and making sure you're evaluating investing in that hydrologic assessment. And really it has to be combined. There's only so much you can do with modeling and remote sensing tools. You need to have the field verification as part of that. So for me, I think part of it, I think what I would recommend most is that we need demonstration projects that are in those high priority areas, and then which have research and monitoring and modeling attached to those demo sites to help catalyze more interest.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Just a reminder, if folks want to add any questions in the chat, please feel free to do so. Marjorie had a question that Joanna's already answered, asking about ways to volunteer in the Straits of Mackinac, and Joanna said to contact the Audubon Great Lakes office to find out what they're planning in that area, but I assume other areas as well, right, Joanna? So if folks are interested in volunteering or being involved in any of Audubon's great work, reach out to the Great Lakes office.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I know they're starting a new project in Green Bay based on this work, so that's another option as well. And they are already doing tons of work in the Calumet area. Which is not one of the areas I highlighted here, but it's one of the areas they've been working on for a long time.
Thanks, Joanna. And I have a question for you. How does Audubon prioritize or incorporate other ecosystem services into your prioritization work? That
is a great question. Yeah. In a lot of our conservation planning, we do try to do that. And in fact, we do have plans to sort of explicitly integrate water quality into this prioritization in the future. That's one thing we've been wanting to do. And in a lot of our other conservation planning efforts, we also look at we've started more and more to look at things like social vulnerability to get it to try to prioritize areas that will really help frontline communities that are going to be most impacted by climate change. So we do often include lots of different types of human benefits into our work, and we have plans to do that in the Great Lakes as well. Not sure when that will happen, but hopefully sometime soon.
Thanks, Joanna. There was a question in the chat that's a follow-up, but I'd like to open it up to both you and Kyle. How do you quantify ecosystem services, but especially in a way that can engage local communities? Whichever one of you would like to take a crack at that first, go ahead.
Well, there's lots of different ways to quantify it. I mean, clearly it's kind of a controversial area, but the experience that I've had is using a couple of different environmental economics tools. You know, things like mostly things like surveying people that use the resources to find out things like there's a technique called willingness to pay, where you ask people how much, you know, assuming you would actually be paying this money, not that it's a pretend survey, but assuming you would actually be plunking down some dollars, how much would you donate to save this particular system? Or there's another technique called travel cost valuation, where you basically ask people how much they spent to travel to a place for tourism or, you know, vacation or whatever, and you add up all those values and you come to a number. But there's lots of other ways to do it. Those are just the ways that I know about, that I've worked with before. I don't know, Kyle, if you've had any other experiences with valuation.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not the expert in running those methods or developing the methods, but there's a huge need for it. And you know, the most agencies, they have their preferred benefit costs, and FEMA is a great example. They call it benefit cost, I think, to be different than others, but there's all their decisions are actually, you know, there's you know, data inputs as part of that process. What's the cost of the road damage? What are the maintenance costs? What are the traffic counts? How critical is that infrastructure to the rural economy or the urban area? And so, you know, everything is really slanted towards structural approaches, and through our research and trying to figure out ways to how do you quantify the benefits of a healthy headwater wetland? Well, FEMA's toolkit actually doesn't really allow for that type of assessment. And even when you look at something more common like floodplain reconnection, or in those mapped FEMA floodplain areas, even that approach is not, there's not a lot of precedent for it. So we're trying to come up with ways, FEMA, you know, like in their toolkit, they do have just default, you know, monetary figures. But I think we need to figure out ways, you know, one, embracing a little bit of uncertainty. We know what healthy watersheds are, you know, the benefits of that, and then also allowing for it to incorporate, you know, indigenous science or traditional knowledge to that. I think there's probably a lot of hesitance to assign a monetary value to everything. So I think those tools are important, but you know, I think it really depends on which programs you're trying to tap into, and there definitely needs to be a lot more research into different methods that are most appropriate, you know, for whether you're working in water quality or flooding or in another discipline.
And I'm going to chime in here too quick, because I feel like this is a great segue into how our title of the webinar works together. Is that we know that by improving our wetlands or implementing wetlands back into the system, we're improving the water quality, which then improves the beaches. Here in Ashland, we have 4 public beaches, and we know that some of those are 2 of them for sure, are heavily impacted by poor water quality, and we're not exactly sure why, but if we can improve the water quality of our beaches, more people will come. If we implement some of those wetland restoration projects, we also get more habitat diversity and just more ecological diversity, which brings about even a different group of people and a user space to be able to hang out there. So trying to put a dollar amount on these, you know, outdoor recreation when you don't pay to do it, but people go to do it, like Joanna said, is really important. I feel like that's how I think a lot of us who are beach managers are trying to be able to make those connections. How can we get more people to use the beach than just swimming? You know, they can go paddleboarding. They now can go bird watching. They can start to go hiking, and that can lead them in many different directions. So I feel like these, you know, doing the wetlands and doing the stream restorations and the wetland restorations really bring about the giant picture of what we're looking for.
That's a great point, Sarah. And I'll put a plug in for our previous webinars, our last one was actually about water levels, but Julie Kinzelman presented on some great work at Sam Myers Beach, which I think also kind of ties into what Sarah has presented. So if you weren't able to catch that presentation, we do put all of our recordings on the website. And so the last webinar is up there right now, and Natalie can put the links to those in the chat for us. And this webinar will also be recorded, of course, and posted online once we're able to get all the captioning done. So do give us, a little bit of time to get that captioning done before you go searching for it. And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to chime in. I know there was another question in the chat from Marjorie. How can people in the humanities help these endeavors? Kyle and Joanna, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, certainly, anybody can volunteer on a restoration project or protection project. It doesn't really matter what your background is. So there's that piece of it. There's also advocacy, things like fundraising and all kinds of non-scientific research type activities that can be done.
Yeah, and I'll agree with those and just add that I think it's really important, the social sciences, and starting to research and look at, what are the motivations for different behavior changes? How do you connect with a farmer or, a recreational landowner to convince them or incentivize, wetland restoration project or whatever conservation practice they're looking at. So I do think we need to expand and utilize more of an interdisciplinary approach, and that includes humanities and everything that comes with it.
Yeah, I'll just add also that one thing that scientists, or at least biological scientists, seem to have trouble with, I know I do, is communicating our research results to the general public. And folks in the humanities, if you have communication skills, they are definitely needed in this area.
Thanks, Joanna and Kyle. I'm going to give, and thanks to Julie. I see Julie posted a comment about Sam Myers Park in the chat if anyone's interested in that. We still have a few minutes left, so if you have questions, put them in the chat or speak up while we're waiting. I am going to go through a couple of announcements. So we have a few upcoming meetings in April. There's the Recreational Water Quality Conference. So this is a national conference hosted virtually by EPA, and it's free for those that want to attend. The focus is on water quality related to E. coli and harmful algal blooms. There's also, towards the end of April, the National Water Quality Monitoring Conference that is hosted by NALMS, the North American Lake Management Society, and the National Water Quality Monitoring Council. So that's coming up in April. And beach season is going to be starting here pretty soon. For folks that are interested in signage or safety resources, connect with the Great Lakes Water Safety Consortium. Natalie is going to put the website in there in the chat for that. And also keep an eye out for, any Earth Day or beach cleanup events coming up soon near your local beach. I know folks have already talked about being interested in helping out with some work, and that would be a good way to do that. We want to thank everyone for coming to our webinar. We really appreciate the great turnout that we've had and the great questions that folks have brought up for our presenters. We will be hosting additional webinars in the future, and look out for those. If you'd like to be first in the know for upcoming webinars, feel free to subscribe to our listserv. We will send updates out to everyone that way. We will also share the recording once the captions are done, both with everyone who registered, and we'll also post them on the website. And a reminder, please complete the exit survey. for this webinar. That helps us figure out what is of most use to folks moving forward. So we really appreciate that. And if anyone has any other organizations, thoughts, questions, comments, feel free to put them in the chat or speak up in the next, minute or so. And thanks again for coming, everyone. Oh, Sarah has put in the chat, if you're interested in beach cleanups, Alliance for the Great Lakes lists beach cleanups throughout the spring, summer, and fall. So that is a good place to go to look for opportunities in your area. And as folks are leaving, I'd just like to thank Joanna and Kyle again for your great presentations. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you too. Kyle, you've had a busy week, and I know Joanna, you have too. So we appreciate you taking time on a Friday afternoon when the sun is out to join us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.